Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Patriots History. We are continuing in our chapter on Jackson, the Promise and Perils of Jacksonian America. And last time we dealt with two issues, the Monroe Doctrine and the Missouri Compromise. And so I'm going to read both of those here today. But before we get started, I had a query from somebody about bias in textbooks. Oh, I don't think they're damn biased. Check out my book, 48 Liberal Lies About American History. What I did in that book was I took the top, not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not 10, the top 20 best-selling U.S. history textbooks used in colleges. Get it? 20. And they were all liberal. Every single one was far to the left, but not just that. They were factually wrong on so many things. That's why I called the book 48 Liberal Lies. Let me give you just one quick example. One of the books flatly stated that without federal government funding, the transcontinental railroads would not have been built. Wrong. The Great Northern Railroad was built transcontinental all the way across the northern part of the U.S. on private money by James J. Hill. He didn't get a dime of government money. And guess what? It was the only railroad to be built right because they weren't getting taxpayer dough and wasting money. In fact, he built it flat, he built it ugly, but he built it so it would last. And also he didn't build on ice as the Union Pacific, Central Pacific did. He didn't build on the steepest grades. In other words, he did everything right. And in the panic of 1893, his was the only transcontinental not to go bankrupt. So, but that's just one of 49. I threw in a bonus lie. There's 49 of these lies in my book, 48 Liberal Lies About American History. All of them, you can see it right up front, taken straight out of these liberal biased textbooks. No, the mainstream textbooks in this country are hugely biased to the left and just flat factually wrong. All right, with that out of the way, let's get started on the Monroe Doctrine of 1823. And I am reading from Patriots History Reader, but you, of course, can just read it from the web or whatever. This is the introduction. The Monroe Doctrine, as it is known today, was established during President James Monroe's 7th annual message to Congress on December 2nd, 1823. The speech originally included remarks indicating American interest in various European events, including the activities of the Holy Alliance, which subsequently became known as the Concert of Europe. But Monroe's Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams, argued persuasively against them. The Spanish Empire in the Western Hemisphere was breaking up into independent nations, and their weak governments and economies could tempt various European powers into seeking new colonial empires. Great Britain sought to protect its trade relationships, and the British foreign minister suggested that the U.S. and Britain issue a joint hands-off statement. Monroe rejected the British initiative, but was forced into action when Russia laid claim to the Northwest and attempted to control trade in that area. Accordingly, a new message was delivered that the United States would tolerate no European interference in the Western Hemisphere affairs, and America would take no part in European matters. Excluded from this policy were European colonies already established in the Americas, such as England's Canada, Spain's Cuba, that were not in revolt against their mother countries, and a doctrine as a foreign policy worked surprisingly well until 1917, when President Woodrow Wilson took the United States into the First World War, intervening in Europe. The key element, however, that made the doctrine effective for the first 70 years was its support by Great Britain and the Royal Navy. Remember, we could not police this doctrine. We needed to have help. The primary world power in the Atlantic Ocean. The reader should reflect on the European powers' penchant toward imperialism during the 19th century and what might have developed in the Western Hemisphere had no such doctrine been in place. Have things become better since the United States abandoned its policy of not becoming involved in Europe's wars and political structures? One could add in the Middle East. Why was the doctrine not enforced against Cuba during the period when a European country, the USSR, supported a hostile state? Think about those. From the President's Annual Message to Congress, 1823. At the proposal of the Russian imperial government made through the Minister of Emperor residing here, a full power and instructions have been transmitted to the Minister of the United States at St. Petersburg to arrange, by amicable negotiation, the respective rights and interests of the two nations on the northwest coast of this continent. A similar proposal has been made by His Imperial Majesty to the government of Great Britain, which has likewise been acceded to. The government of the United States has been desirous, by this friendly proceeding, of manifesting the great value which they have invariably attached to the friendship of the Emperor and to their solicitude and cultivate the best understanding with his government. In the discussions to which this interest has given rise, and in the arrangements by which may terminate the occasion, has been judged proper for asserting, as a principle in which the rights and interests of the United States are involved, that the American continents, plural, are, by the free and independent condition which they have assumed and maintained, are henceforth not to be considered as subjects for future colonization by any European powers. In other words, hands off. It was stated at the commencement of the last session that a great effort was then making in Spain and Portugal to improve the condition of the people of those countries, and that it appeared to be conducted with extraordinary moderation. It needs scarcely be remarked that the result has been so far very different than what was anticipated. Of the events in that quarter of the globe, which we have so much intercourse, and from which we derive our origin, we have always been anxious and interested spectators. The citizens of the United States cherish sentiments the most friendly in favor of the liberty and happiness of their fellow men on the side of the Atlantic. In the wars of the European powers and matters relating to themselves, we have never taken any part, nor does it comport with our policy to do so. It is only when our rights are invaded or seriously menaced that we resent injuries or make preparation for our defense. With the movements in this hemisphere, we are of necessity more immediately connected, and by causes which must be obvious to all enlightened and impartial observers. The political system of the Allied powers is essentially different in this respect from that of America. This difference proceeds from that which exists in their respective governments. And to the defense of our own, which has been achieved by the loss of so much blood and treasure, and matured by the wisdom of the most enlightened citizens, and under which we have enjoyed unexampled felicity, this whole nation is devoted. We owe it, therefore, to candor and to the amicable relations existing between the U.S. and those powers, i.e., the Europeans, to declare that we should consider any attempt on their part to extend their system to any portion of this hemisphere as dangerous to our peace and safety. With the existing colonies or dependencies of any European power, we have not interfered and shall not interfere. But with governments who have declared their independence and maintained it, and whose independence we have on our great consideration and on just principles acknowledged, that is, we recognize these governments, we could not view any interposition for the purpose of oppressing them or controlling in any other manner their destiny by any European power in any other light than as the manifestation of an unfriendly disposition toward the U.S. In other words, any attempt to go into Ecuador or Brazil or whatever will be viewed as a threat to the United States. In the war between those new governments and Spain, we declared our neutrality at the time of their recognition, and to this we have adhered, and shall continue to adhere, provided no change shall occur, which in the judgment of the competent authorities of this government shall make a corresponding change on the part of the United States indispensable to their security. In other words, we didn't interfere when Spain claimed them. We didn't interfere when they went to get their independence, and we're not going to interfere now to help Spain or some other country take them back. The late events in Spain and Portugal show that Europe is still unsettled. Of this important fact, no stronger proof can be adduced than that the Allied powers should have thought it proper, on any principle satisfactory to themselves, to have interposed by force in the internal concerns of Spain. Our policy in regard to Europe, which was adopted in an early stage of the wars which was so long agitated that quarter of the globe, nevertheless remains the same, which is not to interfere in the internal concerns of any of its powers. To consider the government de facto as a legitimate government for us, to cultivate friendly relations with it, to preserve those relations by a frank, firm, and manly policing policy, meeting in all instances the just claims of every power, submitting to injuries from none. But in regard to these continents, circumstances are eminently and conspicuously different. It is impossible that the Allied powers should extend their political system to any portion of either continent without endangering our peace and happiness. You just can't go back in and recolonialize without directly affecting us, Monroe says. Nor can anyone believe that our southern brethren, if left to themselves, would adopt it on their own accord. And they're not going to take you back, Spain. It's equally impossible, therefore, that we should behold such interposition in any form with indifference. If we look to the comparative strength and resources of Spain and those new governments and their distance from each other, it must be obvious that she can never subdue them. It is still the true policy of the United States to leave the parties to themselves in the hope that other powers will pursue the same course. And again, this works, but it only works because the British Navy helped it work. Because, as Monroe said, they're on the other side of the world, and they can't get over here to do much without a Navy, and their Navy won't go far if the Brits decide to stop them. All right, now, although it comes earlier in the reader, it comes later cited in Patriot's history. So now I'm going to read the Missouri Enabling Act, better known as the Missouri Compromise, 1820. The Missouri Enabling Act, the legislative act produced by the Compromise crafted in Congress by Henry Clay to keep the number of free and slave states in the United States equal, went into effect on March 6, 1820. The year before, Alabama had been admitted into the Union, bringing the slave and free states into parity at 11 each. Now, Maine and Missouri were to be admitted. Maine is a free state, Missouri is a slave state. Maine was admitted in March 1820, but another year of rancorous debate would ensue before Missouri was accepted as a state. This act permitted slavery in Missouri, but extended a line west from Missouri's southern border, above which slavery could not be allowed except in the state of Missouri itself. Thomas Jefferson said the Missouri Compromise, as it came to be called, awakened him like, quote, a fire bell in the night, because he realized that the problem of slavery was coming to dominate the national discourse. We don't really have fire bells in the night anymore, but I lived in Ohio for 30 years, and we would have tornado warnings in the night. And when you heard a tornado warning, you shot up in bed and you grabbed your keys and some water, a radio, a flashlight, the dog, the kids, if they've been good, and you go down to the basement to ride it out. Okay, so it's definitely something that alerts you. And this act, news of this act, shocked Jefferson so much it was like we're having a fire in town. Northern population growth had already given free states control of the House of Representatives. This is even with the 3/5 addition. And Delaware, Maryland, and Kentucky were slave states with substantial anti-slavery populations. The Missouri Compromise only delayed a solution rather than providing a permanent one. Next to come was the question of slavery in and the timing of statehood for Arkansas, Michigan, Texas, Florida, Iowa, and Wisconsin. And eventually everything fell apart with California, Minnesota, Oregon, and Kansas, all free territories seeking admission as states, all of which could vote against slavery. Everyone knew the parity between slave and free states could not be maintained forever. But the only other approach attempted was Martin Van Buren's, which involved creation of a national party, i.e. the Democrats, that would ignore the issue of slavery. Remember the purpose, we haven't really gotten here yet, but the purpose of the Democrat Party. The purpose, let me say this real slow. The only reason for the creation of the Democrat Party was to protect and preserve slavery. It had no national goals. It had no for the good of the people. It had no of the people, by the people, for the people. It had only how do we protect slavery as a party. Jesus said you cannot get good fruit from a bad tree. Okay, the Democrat Party's a bad tree. It cannot give good fruit because it's evil from its start in trying to protect and preserve slavery. All right. Was Martin Van Buren's, which involved the creation of a national party that would ignore the issue of slavery and reward its supporters with party and government jobs. We'll talk about this more next time. Within 40 years, however, the folly of Van Buren's system was exposed when the presidency fell into the hands of a Northerner, Abraham Lincoln, who vowed to keep slavery out of the territories. In effect, the short-term patches made the eventual long-term solution when it came more violent and disruptive. Another way to look at all these compromises, folks, is that we would have been better off probably to fight it out in 1820 rather than 1860. It would have been far less bloody, and probably the conflict would have been over sooner, but we'll never know. An act to authorize the people of Missouri Territory to form a constitution and state government, and for the admission of such state into the Union on an equal footing with the original states, and prohibit slavery in certain territories. Be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled that the inhabitants of the portion of the Missouri Territory included within the boundaries herein after designated be, and they are hereby authorized to form for themselves a constitution and state government, and to assume such name as they shall deem proper, and the said state, when formed, shall be admitted into the Union upon an equal footing with the original states in all respects whatsoever. Section 2. And be it further enacted that said state shall consist of all territory included within the following boundaries, to wit, beginning in the middle of the Mississippi River on the parallel of 36 degrees of north latitude, thence west along the parallel of latitude to the St. Francois River, thence up and following the course of that river in the middle of the main channel thereof to the parallel of a latitude of 36 degrees and 30 minutes, thence west along the same to a point where said parallel is intersected by a meridian line passing through the middle of the mouth of the Kansas River, where the same empties into the Missouri River, thence from the point aforesaid north along that said median line to the intersection of the parallel latitude which passes through the rivers of the river Des Moines, making the said line to correspond with the Indian boundary line, thence east from the point of intersection last aforesaid along the said parallel latitude to the middle of the channel of the North Main Fork of the said river Des Moines, thence down to the middle of the main channel of said river Des Moines, to the mouth of the same where it empties into the Mississippi River, thence due east to the middle of the main channel of the Mississippi River, thence down and following the course of the Mississippi River in the middle of the main channel thereof to the place of the beginning, provided the said, so they're giving you where all the latitude and longitude and the map lines are to be drawn. They keep saying in the middle of the river, meaning insofar as a state, any state, has authority over a interstate waterway, Missouri can claim half the Missouri River. Like if a body's floating and there's some question about was it involved in a crime, Missouri could go claim that body. Whereas if it's on the other side of the river, depending on where you are, you'd have another state exercise a claim over that portion of the river. However, no state has total authority over interstate waterways, only the federal government. So this would have to do mostly with state laws. Provided the said state shall ratify the boundaries aforesaid, and provided also the said state shall have concurrent jurisdiction on the river Mississippi and every other river bordering on said state, so far as the said river shall form a common boundary to said state, and any other state or states now or hereafter to be formed and bounded by the same, such rivers to be common to both, and that the river Mississippi and the navigable rivers and waters leading to the same shall be common highways and forever free. In other words, Missouri can't claim, oh, we got the Mississippi River, you got to pay us a toll just to go down the Mississippi. as well to the inhabitants of said state and to other citizens of the United States without any tax, duty, impost, or toll, therefore imposed by said state. Section 3, and be it further enacted that all free white male citizens of the United States who shall have arrived at the age of 21 years and have resided in said territory 3 months previous to the day of election, and all other persons qualified to vote for representatives to the General Assembly of said territory shall be qualified to be elected, and they are hereby qualified and authorized to vote and choose representatives to form a convention who shall be apportioned among the several counties. Section 4, and be it further enacted that the members of the convention thus duly elected shall be, and they are hereby authorized to meet at the seat of government and said territory on the second Monday of the month of June next, and said convention, when so assembled, shall have the power to and authority to adjourn any other place in said territory, which to them shall seem best for the convenient transaction of their business, adjourn to any other place. In other words, you're going to meet here to start with, but after that, you can decide where you want to meet. Which to them shall seem best for the convenient transaction of their business, and which convention, when so met, shall first determine by a majority of the whole number elected, whether it be or be not expedient at that time to form a constitution and state government for the people within the said territories, included within the boundaries above designated, and if it be deemed expedient, the convention shall be, and hereby is, authorized to form a convention and state government, or if deemed more expedient, the said convention shall provide by ordinance for electing representatives to form a constitution or frame a government, which said representatives shall be chosen in manner and in such proportion as they shall designate, and shall meet at such time and place as shall be prescribed by the said ordinance. In other words, they're going to meet in the Constitution. They're going to select representatives to the state legislature. They're going to decide how to select these legislators. It's all up to them. Provided that the same, wherever formed, shall be republican and not repugnant to the Constitution of the United States. You can't elect a tyranny. And that the legislature of said state shall never interfere with the primary disposal of the soil by the United States, or with any regulations Congress may find necessary for securing the title in such soil to the bona fide purchasers, and that no tax shall be imposed on the lands, the property of the United States, and in no case shall non-resident proprietors be taxed higher than residents. In other words, you remember, we go back all the way to the Land Ordinance of 1785, which I said was the most important law in American history prior to the Constitution. And it said that you would survey these lands, and all the sections of land would be sold off by the federal government, except 4 sections of land that were to be reserved to the federal government for purposes of an armory, building a school, or selling off at a later date. Now, Missouri is not fully filled up. It's got a lot of room. So they're saying that the state government can't take the land and sell it for state revenues, that it's still federal land till they sell it all off. Section 5, and be it further enacted, the next general census shall be taken, said state shall be entitled to 1 representative in the House of Representatives of the United States. Section 6, and be it further enacted that the following propositions be and the same are hereby offered to the convention of said territory of Missouri when formed, for their free acceptance or rejection, which if accepted by the convention shall be obligatory upon the United States. We, the people of the United States, are going to make some suggestions. If you take these suggestions, we will be obliged to follow them. First, that section numbered 16 in every township, and when such section shall be sold or otherwise disposed of, other lands equivalent thereto and contiguous as may be shall be granted to the state for the use of the inhabitants of such township for the use of a school. So this goes back to there's supposed to be 1 section in every state for a public school. The founders knew what had happened to public schools now. They never would have approved that. Second, that all salt springs not exceeding 12 in number with 6 sections of land adjoining to each shall be granted to said state for the use of said state, and the same to be selected by the legislature of said state on or before the 1st day of January in the year 1825, and the same, when so selected, shall be under such terms, conditions, regulations, the legislature of said state shall direct, provided that no salt spring, the right whereof now is or hereafter shall be confirmed or adjudged to any individual or individuals, shall by this section be granted to the said state, and provided also that the legislature shall never sell or lease the same at any one time for a longer period than 10 years without the consent of Congress. So these salt springs were pretty important. And if an individual happened to own one, you couldn't steal it. And if the state got them and wanted to sell it, they had to wait 10 years before selling the next one. And even then they had to get the permission of Congress. Fourth, that 4 entire sections of land be and at the same are hereby granted to said state for the purpose of fixing their seat of government thereon, which said section shall, under the direction of the legislature, be said state be located as near or may be as one body at any time in such townships and ranges as the legislature aforesaid may select on any of the public lands of the United States, provided that such location shall be made prior to the public sale of the lands and the United States surrounding such a location. So you had to say where you're going to put the state legislature, and then you can sell off the land around it. And this was so that somebody couldn't sneak in and get all the land around and say, oh, the legislature is going to be there. And of course, you got to have banks, you have to have lawyers, you have to have all sorts of support activities around the state legislature. So even today, many state legislature towns, even though they are not the main town in a state, Sacramento, for example, is only the 3rd or 4th largest town in California. I don't know if San Diego is larger than Sacramento or not, but it is the seat of government. Okay. Topeka, Kansas, probably not as big as Kansas City. I don't know. I'm just guessing. So Madison, Wisconsin, it's not as big as Milwaukee, but they would put these legislatures out there, and then cities would bloom up around them because they needed support staff and restaurants and all sorts of other stuff around them. Third, that 5% of the net proceeds of the sale of lands lying within said territory or state, which shall be sold by Congress from and after the 1st day of January next, after deducting all expenses incident to the same, shall be reserved for making public roads and canals, of which 3/5 shall be applied to those objects within the state, under the direction of the state legislature thereof, and the other 2/5 defraying, under the direction of Congress, the expenses to be incurred in making of a road or canal or canals leading to said state. So they're already starting to think about interstate commerce, roads and canals. And they're saying, okay, you got to dedicate some land to making either canals or roads. And some of that you actually build the road or canal on, but some of the rest you can use to sell off to pay for the roads or the canals. Fourth, the 4 sections of land being the same are hereby granted each state for the purpose of fixing their seat of, did I read this? Let's see. Yes. That the 4 entire section of land be and same are hereby granted to said state for the purpose of fixing their seat of government thereon, which said section shall, under the direction of the legislature in said state, be located as near as may be in one body at any time in such townships and ranges of the legislature aforesaid may select on any of the public lands of the United States, provided such locations be made prior to the public sale of the lands of the United States surrounding such location. Okay, I think I got those 2 out of order. The canals was 3rd, this one was 4th. All right, 5th, that 36 sections or 1 entire township, which shall be designated by the President of the United States together with other lands, heretofore reserved for that purpose, shall be reserved for the use of a seminary of learning and vested in the legislature of said state to be appropriated solely to the use of such seminary by said legislature, provided that the 5 foregoing propositions herein offered are on the condition that the convention of the said state shall provide by an ordinance irrevocable without the consent of the United States, that every and each tract of land sold by the United States from and after the 1st day of January next shall remain exempt from any tax laid by order or under the authority of the state. So any of this federal land we give you, you can't tax, whether for state, county, township, or any other purpose whatever, for the term of 5 years from and after the day of sale. So you got 5 years, you're not going to be able to tax this, then you can tax it. Furthermore, that the bounty lands granted or hereafter to be granted for the military services during the late war This is land given to veterans for their service in the War of 1812. They continue to be held by the patentees, those who got them, or their heirs, remain exempt as aforesaid from taxation for the term of 3 years from and after the date of the patents, respectively. So if you got a patent to land in Missouri, and it was opened up in 1820, you had until 1823 where you weren't going to be taxed on that land. Not a bad deal. Section 7, and be it further enacted that in case a constitution and state government shall be formed for the people of said territory of Missouri, the said convention or representatives, as soon thereafter as may be, shall cause a true and attested copy of such constitution or frame a state government as it shall be formed or provided to be transmitted to Congress. So when you guys are all done, you send us your constitution. Section 8, and be it further enacted that in all territories ceded by France to the United States under the name of Louisiana, which lies north of 36 degrees and 30 minutes north latitude, not included within the limits of the state. So anything north of 3630 that isn't called Missouri, contemplated by this act, slavery and involuntary servitude otherwise than in the punishment of crimes whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall be and is hereby forever prohibited, provided always that any person escaping into the same from whom labor or service is lawfully claimed in any state or territory in the United States, such a fugitive must be lawfully reclaimed and conveyed to the person claiming his or her labor or service aforesaid. So they snuck in, I don't say snuck in, they put it in the very last clause, probably the most important clause of all, which said that everything north of the 3630 parallel, which was going to be Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, the Dakotas, Wyoming, Idaho, Colorado, parts of Colorado, parts of Oregon, parts of Washington, Minnesota, would all be slave. All be free. Did I say so? They would all be free. They would prohibit slavery. Let me say that again. All those territories, Minnesota, Iowa, the Dakotas, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, part of Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, Oregon, Washington, would all be free. The only part not covered in this was a tiny part of modern-day Oklahoma and part of modern-day Arkansas. Those, Congress said, could choose to be free or slave states. Arkansas chose to be a slave state. I think, I can't remember, I think slavery was prohibited by the time Oklahoma was a state. So you see what has happened here. The newly drawn map has set up a situation where within the next 40 or 50 years, the vast majority, more than 2/3 of the states were going to be free states. And they could act on slavery to abolish it, prohibit it, whatever, however they wanted to do it, because they would have a sizable majority in the Senate and in the House. And it was this nightmare that really awoke Jefferson, because Jefferson saw this coming. And when that moment occurred, he knew there would be a civil war, because Jefferson knew the South was not going to give up its slaves. We come back to this whole business about states' rights. Baloney. Yes, they did claim states' rights. Yes, states' rights are important. Yes, we need states' rights. But the only states' right the Confederacy was interested in was the right to hold other human beings as slaves. And they said so not once, not twice, but 3 times in their Constitution. So this is very important. What we're going to do next time is pick up how Martin Van Buren saw this in the same way Jefferson saw it, was terrified, and sets out to build a political party that can basically overcome what he sees of all these free states coming in the future. All right, that's it. Stay tuned. I will probably have a good, interesting announcement for you as we near Thanksgiving. I may be on a certain famous show about that time. And meanwhile, we will have on Black Friday exceptional book offers, 3, 4, and 5 book offers with different kinds of books mixed up: Patriots History, Reagan, 48 Liberal Lies, the Patriots History Reader, Dragon Slayers, my autobiography. There's going to be all sorts of mix and match things there available to you. So check that out. And in the meantime, if you want political commentary, go over to the Wild World of Politics. Sign up for the Insider. It's only $5 a month. And you'll get Larry's commentary right after this show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And you'll also get ongoing lesson programs. Got 5 of them, but my most recent is Globalism Then and Now. It's a look into a Patriot's history of globalism, coming out in February 2024. Meanwhile, at both sites, buy Larry a coffee. If these are valuable to you, help me out. I make it all free for you. Buy me a coffee. Go to the Buy Larry a Coffee link and buy me 10 if you want to. All right, I'll see you guys back here on Friday.